Right, completing the square with circles. One good thing to know, and we're going to start with these, is actually understanding the different forms that my equation of a circle can come in. And some of you may be thinking there's only one right now, but we're going to see a second one today that sometimes our problems are written in. But the standard form of a circle, and this is the one that we've worked with before, basically is you have your x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared is my radius squared. And again, the center of my circle would be at hk. In other words, whatever I would see in here, I'd take its opposite, and that would tell me the center of my circle, which is going to be important to us because we're going to be doing a little bit of graphing today with these. So what we're going to do to kind of lead into this, sort of like what we did yesterday, is we're going to start with something familiar and then start adding pieces to it until we get to our new thing. So here, we're going to identify the center and the radius, then we're going to just sketch the graph. So for number 2, what would my center be?
-3.
2, -3. 2, -3. And our radius. 2, because we're just taking the square root of this. Since r squared is 4, r would just be 2. So again, if you're going to draw these, we're just going to go 2 in each of the directions that are easy. So right and left and up and down. And no, we're not making a square or a diamond here. Those dots are just going to give us a little bit of guidance as we attempt to make a circle that doesn't look too much like a flat tire or some other bad thing like that. But that's basically, and you're like, okay, that's something we've done before. Now on the next one, the radius is easy to deal with. What's my center going to be, though? Good catch, okay? -1, and if there is no value here, it'd be the equivalent of having y plus 0. So it's just going to be 0. So -1, 0. My radius is going to be 6 each direction. And a much bigger circle this time with our bigger radius. Only slightly lopsided, not bad. But again, that's review type things. That's stuff that we've done before. And now what we're going to do is we're going to sort of start trying to bring ourselves into what's going to be going on today with our completing the square. But one more review piece. Use the information provided to write the standard form, which is what we wrote up top, equation of the circle. So I basically start checking this out, and I'm just going to plug the values in, because here's my hk. So x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals my radius squared. And that's all we're looking for here. Now is when, though, the twists start to come in. Because now I'm not going to give you the center and the radius, I'm going to give you the center and a point on the circle. Okay. Well, I mean, I know this is still going to be h and k, so it's going to be the opposite of -15. So x plus 15 squared, okay. And then y minus k, all right. But when they don't give me the radius, what might I do in this case with the information given to try and figure out what that radius is? Yeah, my y values, I notice my x values are the same, but my y values, how far is it to get from 3 to -1, or from -1 to 3? So you can even think about that as far as on a number line would go. How far is it from 3 to -1? Well, it's 4. So my radius on this one would be 4 based on the distance between my y values. And if my r is 4, r squared is going to end up being 16. So again, and that's probably as bad as it's going to get as far as some of our equations go. So now we get to throw the new stuff in. Use the information provided to write the general conic form equation of each circle. This is the way most of our problems are going to end up being written today, and this is a new form, at least I'd think for some of you. So what we're going to have is we're going to have something that's got x squared and y squared, and then it's going to have an x term, and then it's going to have a y. There's going to be a constant term, and it'll finally end. Because actually in this form it's going to be easier for us to complete the square when we need to find some answers to things. Now there may be times that you may have a piece of this that's missing, but the main key to remember is at the end we're going to want to get to this form. So, center and radius. Well, that's better to get it to this form. Okay, we're going to have to go that route here at the beginning. So at the beginning, I'm going to put it into standard form to start. And once I get it into standard form, I'm basically going to undo it. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to FOIL or multiply this out, and then I'm going to start moving the parts around. So remember, x minus 7 squared isn't as simple as just distributing the squared and calling it x squared minus 49. That might be nice, but it's not actually what's going to happen. So just remember, if you can do it mentally, great. Otherwise, jot it down, do a little side work like I'm looking at here. And I'm looking and I'm going, okay, so I've got x squared, all right. And then I've got a minus 7x and another minus 7x, okay. And on this first one, I'm going to be a little more in-depth with my details. And then negative times negative, it'd be plus 49. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with my y's. So I'll move this just a little bit here so we can see a little bit better. And again, if you're visual, write it out. Otherwise, just roll right on. So y squared. And then I got 2 minus 1 y's, and we'll get how to shortcut that in a minute. Plus 1. You're like, holy cow. That's a whole lot of stuff going on. Yes, it is. But again, we're going to find patterns to make this shorten up anyway, so it's really not going to be that big of a deal to us. So okay, let's bring this down. I can combine my x's. Over here I can combine my y terms. Whoops, minus. And now I start taking a look at the form I'm trying to get to. And I'm like, okay, form I've got has x squared and then y squared. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get that done. So x squared plus y squared, okay. Then my x terms, just that one, all right. Then my y term, okay. Now, then it says plus e. So for here, I'm going to combine those two. It gets me 50. And you're like, oh, well the only thing left now is I want it to equal 0, so I got to move the 16 over, and it'll go with my constant term. And like I said, we're gonna clean this up a bit, minus the 16 over. And now I'm in conic form. And again, this is the form that most of your equations are going to be in when we're trying to put them and complete the square and get them ready so we can do the circle. So we're going to be starting this direction and going backwards. So it's kind of like undoing what we're about to do. But what you'll notice is, and if you haven't noticed this before, some of you probably have, when you're looking from like this step to this one, notice you're just squaring your last term, and your middle term would be negative 7x. What I'd get if I put these two together, just double it. So negative 7 and negative 7, 2 of them gets me negative 14. 2 negative 1s get me negative 2. So we can speed this up a little bit. So I'm still going to go ahead and write this out in the standard form to start. But once I do that, I'm going to try to start combining things together. So instead of doing all the FOIL work, I'm going to see if I can knock this out a little quicker. So I'm like, okay, x squared, if I double 13, that's 26. So that's going to be my middle term. And then I square my 13. And that way, instead of having to write it out and FOIL everything, I just take advantage of the pattern. I just double whatever that number is. I'm going to do the same thing with my y's. If I double negative 16, okay, I'm not squaring it, I'm doubling it. So a negative will still stay negative. And then negative 16 squared is 256. Now again, if you're more comfortable foiling it out and taking the one extra step to get here, that's fine. But I always like to show you those options. And now we're ready to get into our form. So x squared and y squared start. Then I go to my x term, to my y term. Then we got to take care of all these guys. So let's see here, 425, but then I have to bring the 1 over. But I still actually like to write this last step out, just because sometimes if I tend to do too many things at once, I get myself in trouble. But I do need to end up at 0 at the end. And you're like, okay, so we just did it to take it from the small to the large, and now you'll never guess. We're going to go from the large form back to the small using our completing the square type terms. So, change each equation to standard form by completing the square. Identify the center and radius. So here's our conic form. So now we're basically going to work this backwards. So here's how this is going to work. It's a little different in the way it looks from our work yesterday. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to group my x's and I'm going to group my y's together. That's going to be my first step. So x's together at the start, y's together after that. And if you don't have a variable, you are out of the club. We banish you to the other side of the equation. Once we've got that taken care of, we're basically going to complete the square twice for every problem. So on this first one, I'm going to go ahead. For this first one, until we get used to it, I'm going to leave myself a blank. And I'm going to do the same thing with the y's. I'm going to isolate them with the parentheses, with a blank, because I'm going to have a number to put in there in a minute. And just like we did yesterday, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to both. So those two numbers that I'm going to add on the left, I'm also going to add over on the right. But the process of finding that number is exactly the same thing as we did yesterday. So for instance, yesterday when we wanted to complete the square, we would take our b value, which in this case is 30. So if I'm working on my x's here, take my b value, divide it by 2, and square it. So that goes here, and it also goes as one of my numbers that I'm adding on the other side. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my y values. So for y, we have got -2. So I divide -2 by 2, get -1, square that, and that will be my value that goes in with my y's and also goes on the other side. Because again, this is still an equation. I still want to have balance. So I'm adding the same two values to both sides, so none of the actual expression will change as far as the value goes. So then I'm ready to get it into binomial form. And again, we knew that shortcut yesterday. I don't want to have to factor this, even though it wouldn't be terrible. Whatever I got when I did b divided by 2, this positive 15, I'll go ahead and get that in. Whatever my b divided by 2 was for my y, -1, I'll get that in. And then I'm looking and I'm like, hey, that's in standard form. There's nothing else to do. It looks just like the one we had started on the other side. So then I'm ready to get my center. Again, remember it's opposites on both of these. And then the square root of that will be my radius. And I'm set. Thank you. So we're trying to get to this, but again, we want to get it to standard form to get there. Now, let's see. I won't drive you nuts by making you do every single one of these, so I want to find a couple, yeah, bigger ones. So let's drop down to 10. Might get a little more room if we need it this way. All right, first things first. X's together, Y's together. And if some of you are comfortable enough at this point that you want to go ahead and get straight to the grouping part and do that as your first step, that's okay. Once they're set, again, I'm going to be heading to my binomial form. So I've got to figure out, oh, I'm trying to skip steps. Way to go, Harty. That's how people get in trouble trying to skip steps. Again, I look at my x value, take that number, divide it by 2, and square it. So I've got x squared minus 14x plus 49, which I will also add to the other side. For my y, I've got 12, so 12 divided by 2 is 6, and square that. And again, what gets added to one side gets added to both. And now that I have my perfect square trinomials, I'm ready to tackle this. And again, I could just factor that, or I can take the easy way out, just take my b divided by 2. With my y's, multiply to 36 and add to 12, or just steal my b divided by 2. I'm in standard form. Opposites of both of these to get my center. And the square root of 64 will give me my radius. So let's see here. Let's go one more time. I guess we'll just go evens here. I'm going to go straight down the way. We're going to do the exact same thing one last time, except now we're going to actually graph it when we get done. So we'll keep that one up. Start playing here. Let's see, actually I want to be below here, so we'll move a little more. So x's together, y terms together, constant terms banished to the other side. And once I get that, now I'm looking for those values that I'm going to need. So let's see, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and square it will be 9. I'm just going to do this work first this time. With my y's, it's a negative 8 divided by 2. Negative 4 squared is 16. So let's see, I got x squared plus 6x. And that'll always be a positive value. If for some reason you get a negative sometime, it's because you forgot your parentheses. We'll never have a negative number that we're adding with these under any circumstances. And then again, those two values that you got for x and y need to be added to both sides. So, all right, we grouped off the x's and y's. Now we're going to get them into their binomial form. Again, just steal your b divided by 2 value, so positive 3 for x, negative 4 for y. I'm into standard form. So I can find my center by using the opposites of h and k. And my radius is the square root of 9, which is 3. And then again, just 3 out in each of your basic directions. And you're ready to roll. So basically, what you're going to be looking at for the homework on this is just going to be the worksheet's basically running the same directions all the way down. So all you're going to want to do here. So this guy will be, as we keep going here on homework check number 8, this will be our third assignment in there. Basically, it's going to go right along with what we have on our note sheet. And then tomorrow we'll be heading towards the end here. I will believe tomorrow we've got the quadratic formula on tap, and then we'll be ready to go for the quiz preview and kind of take things from there.
Can you do something?